we have the publisher of Kung Fu Magazine, Gene Ching. What's up, Gene?
Hey, good to see you.
Good to see you. And I just want to tell viewers that years before I ever started Fight Commentary Breakdowns, I checked out a little issue of Kung Fu Magazine and I sent it to Gene when I reached out to him. So if I didn't see that issue of Kung Fu Magazine, and it was literally about how to take certain sword forms and make it about combat, I might have never had the idea to start Fight Commentary Breakdown. So I got to give you so much credit, man. Thank you.
Wow, that's very gratifying to hear. I mean, one of my main missions in terms of publishing and writing is to inspire other people to, follow the path, follow the way.
So let us start from the beginning. You're Hakka, and is
I am Hakka, yeah.
the martial arts big in the Hakka community?
There were some of my family that practiced. My family all came to Hawaii, and so I've got some cousins that were Hakka people in Hawaii, and that actually it was another cousin, kind of a distant cousin, that sort of first inspired me to get involved with the martial arts because he was a Kung Fu man, and they came through, and they had a team that was going to a tournament, and they stayed at my house when I was a little kid. And, I had this little toy sword. It was this, they used to make these stupid toy swords. This is probably before your time, that were, for some reason, the blades were like these, like plastic, not diamond shaped, but X-shaped blades with a little blunt end. And they were really brittle, and they would snap sharp. It was like one of those things that obviously wouldn't exist nowadays because it's such a hazard. And, I all these, this is when I was very young. I'm like 5 or so, and all these guys came over, and they all were, all gonna borrow my little toy sword, and they broke it right away. But then they showed me like their real sword, or one of their Kung Fu swords, and I was just like, wow, what is that? And that kind of got me rolling, and literally, because my first martial art was judo. And that was kind of all that was available. I was raised in Pennsylvania, and there was nobody. I was always available. My parents didn't really know the difference. And so when I came back out to California, then I did. I got involved with the judo school dojo, but it was kind of a Shotokan judo hybrid thing that didn't quite work out for me, and I kind of left. But then I still had this fascination with swords, and so it's funny that sword issue was one that inspired you, because that's I put a lot of heart into all my sword stuff, because that's my root, and that's how I kind of got involved with Kung Fu. It's how I got involved with fencing, how I got involved with Kendo and the Aido. It's all been sword arts.
Did you, from a young age, know that one day you'd be publishing Kung Fu Magazine, or was that something that came later?
No, not at all. Not at all. When I backtrack it makes a lot more sense. But I was looking to become a professor. I was a doctorate candidate at UCSC, and didn't work out. So my life course took a different turn. And when I left graduate school, I actually went to college defense, as absurd as that sounds. I'm not like extremely athletic either. It was sort of a happenstance thing that I had taken this summer camp with Maestro Michael DeSaro, who was the coach at San Jose State University. And he was very reputed master. In fact, there's a documentary on him called Stro that you can see on Amazon Prime. But I went to a summer camp with him just before I was graduating high school, and he said, most of my team, I trained them. They come to college, they learn to fence in college, and I already had been fencing since junior high school, so I had several years under me. And he was like, if you come on as a freshman, you could probably make the team because you've got enough foundation. And I was going to go to, it's a community college because I had no idea. But he said the instant you enroll in any college, your NCAA status starts ticking. 5 years, defense 4. And I hadn't really thought about it. And at that time, community college wasn't that disparate from the state colleges here in California. So I went to fence, and it was an amazing experience. I might have learned more from that experience than I learned from the collegiate experience. Um, but yeah, that kind of got me rolling into it. And when I left the graduate program, one of my teammates got me connected with a company that was doing uh, sword making, mostly for fencing, but also they had a department that did historical swords, mostly for live theater, but also some for Renaissance fairs and that sort of stuff. And our whole thing was that we built swords that were not necessarily the prettiest things, but they were designed to take a beating because a lot of actors, they were hitting these swords and they'd break them and they'd have to be easy to replace. And, if a production like broke a sword in mid-production, we could, we could express mail them a replacement part. They would have to buy the whole thing and all screwed together. It wasn't like, I was never pounding metal in a forge or anything like that. I was basically doing assembly work. But then that kind of spiraled out, it was an odd job working in a shop. And that I was teaching then a little bit under my teacher, both fencing and kung fu. And I started writing just because I thought the quality of writing in most martial arts magazines was fairly poor. And this is the late '80s. It's improved by leaps and bounds, but now there's people actually doing research, which is really exciting. And that eventually spiraled into working for my Kung Fu master Wing Lam, and helping him found Wing Lam Enterprises. And then I got headhunted to Kung Fu magazine, and that's kind of where I am now to some degree still.
What was your expectation like when you started versus what are some realities of working at a magazine that maybe most people don't know if you don't work behind the scenes?
I came in, I was young, and I was, eager to meet all these masters. And very quickly I got schooled that, I'd like to, being a martial artist myself, I kind of like to get a taste of what they're doing. And very quickly I got schooled that that's not the wisest way to go, because a lot of these guys are really, they're masters. They're walking in. And if I would ask them, politely, can we cross hands a little bit? They would take that as kind of a martial challenge and beat the crap out of me. I mean, nobody ever really hurt me, but they've always pushed me to a point like, okay, tap, you win. Because I was not that, I like to think I'm a competent martial artist, but I'm nowhere near, a lot of the masters that walked in, the grandmasters that walked in. And, it was actually, I was with Alex Tao, who's this amazing martial artist that formed his own sort of military-based style. And I was just kind of acting like, show me some of these techniques of this thing, just getting an idea, sort of writing this cover story on him. And he gets on his guard. And I'm kind of on my guard. I'm like, okay, I'll throw him a punch and he'll do something. And his fist, this guy's an iron palm guy, iron hand guy. And his fist literally turned red. And he dials, and I'm kind of like, wait a minute, this can't be right. and he had great china, so he would just wrap me up into this crazy painful ball. And after that, I was like, okay, maybe some of the Tai Chi guys, I'll get a taste of what they're doing, but you got to go gentle on that. That was a big misconception. Also, I think what was disappointing was how poor the quality of writing and research was back then. And I think to some degree that still exists, but it's a lot better now. I had people that were submitting I had one guy submit me an article that I had written. He had just plagiarized the whole thing. So that was, I guess you could see the underbelly of, all these. I mean, unfortunately, the martial arts has always been plagued by paper tigers, and that part was kind of ugly and disappointing. The other thing was Kung Fu magazine was funded by, or still is funded by, Tiger Claw, right, which is a martial arts primarily B2B distributor. So they were selling to schools and stores, and I could see people's business, at least in terms of how much they were buying from us. Of course, they may have been buying from Century or buying from all these other companies, Asian World Martial Arts, but I could see very direct numbers if I wanted to on how well and how successful some of these schools were doing. And so that was a very interesting metric. It was very revealing. And of course, the success of a school doesn't rely so much on the skill of the master. It relies mostly on the skill of the master in business, right? You could have a very talented master who just can't operate a school very well. And you could have, a very mediocre master who just knows how to operate a business and could make a lot of money. But so there was that kind of disparity that became very, very clear very, very quickly. But I mean, on the whole, I mean, it's been such a blessing to be in the position to be able to see the industry from from an internal perspective, or from a perspective that you don't usually see, right?
So you mentioned you got submissions to articles. How else did you guys fill out the magazine? Did you have to do your own reporting? Did you tell me more about that process of getting an issue together?
Oh yeah, I did a lot of reporting. I did a lot of stuff under pen names too, to be honest with you. I had over 30 or 40 nom de plumes, each who I developed personalities for, and and a lot of that was my own sort of training as a writer. I was trained academically. I was trained in APA format, American Psychology. My major was psychology, so it's a scientific format, an academic format, which is the driest, most horrible. Why it doesn't work for magazines, right? So I had to break that, and so sometimes I would look at somebody else's writing. I mean, just like when you do martial arts, you shamelessly emulate the masters, and you try and poach and steal everything they've got. Absorb what is useful, like Bruce Lee said. And so I would do that. I look at like Stephen King. This one character is writing in the voice of Stephen King, and I would try and emulate that or what have you. I'm going to interview this person like Terry Gross, and I'm going to steal her styles and try and do those sorts of things. In terms of research, I mean, there was always people coming to us, and so that was good. There was always heard a lot of bad submissions too. I mean, and I confess I may have run a few of those just because sometimes there was a dry month or a dry quarter where I just wasn't getting the amount of submissions, or I was just too burnt out to do more submissions. The nice part for me personally was that I could pursue my own passions. Like I did an issue that was exclusively focused on swordsmanship and swords and antique swords and stuff. And that one of the things I really pushed for was a featured weapon in every issue, and which was an antique. The Chinese martial arts weaponry, it's one of the most diverse arsenals. I mean, crazy weapons, right? Crazy hooks and weird blades, and like how do you even fight with this thing? And some of that I think descends from opera, but I think a lot of it, you can find archaeologic examples of these things. It isn't as well documented as the Japanese stuff or the European stuff, or even the Indonesian stuff, the Polynesian stuff. It's a great sort of in the field of topology and the study of arms and armor. It's a big gap. That gap is closing now. We're starting to see more research on it. But one of the things that I knew a lot of collectors, and I really wanted to showcase, real antique weapons, and because they're very different than the modern stuff. Some of them, right? And there's that authenticity when you pick up a real sword or a real antique that may have actually killed somebody at some point, or at least cut somebody. That balance, that feel, that whole make, it's so different than the practice swords and weapons that we use. And there's just an education alone in doing that, and handling those and getting that feel.
When I first started rediscovering some of these Chinese weapons arts, right, it was the same exact feeling. I'm like, China's so old that anything that could have been turned into a weapon was a weapon at one point, whether to defend against bandits, muggers, or in a field of war. So I remember just looking at, wow, there's specific weapons used on specific modes of transportation. Like, that's how detailed it gets with Chinese martial arts. And yeah, like you said, we all focus on the bare hands because obviously a lot of the kung fu cinema was bare hand stuff. But man, the weapon stuff, I love that you said the gap is getting filled, but there's still a lot of gap that I hope more reporters, more explorers, etc., will keep digging up archaeological and literary sources to kind of recreate slash get to know better.
Yeah, I mean, it's an amazing field, and not only is it incredibly diverse, but people always talk about, like, say, the Indonesian and the Japanese, and even some of the Viking swords that were layered steel, and they folded a million times. But you're folding the billet, you only have to fold it 16 times to get a million layers. But China had that too.
Yeah.
And some of those old examples of swords, you see a Hamon line, as they would put it in Japan, differential hardening of the steel. And that stuff's beautiful. Their technologies, but we don't, I think part of that is because of the movies, because they're using all these kind of cartoonish weapons. And especially now with modern wushu, where we're using these super light weapons that are more like acrobatic props, gymnastic props.
Yeah.
We've lost connection with a lot of the real weapons, but they're out there.
Yeah.
They're definitely out there, and it's always a joy to kind of see one and pick it up and play with it a little bit.
I remember there was a movie starring Zhao Wei that was called Warriors from Heaven and Earth, I believe it was called, and it made such an impression of me because all their weapons there, yes, they had some like kung fu-esque fighting, but all their weapons weren't like flabby wushu weapons. Those were weapons that it was like one-hit kill weapons. And so like some people were like, it kind of feels like Lord of the Rings. It kind of feels like, but it's like, yeah, in the ancient battlefield, weapons weren't meant to be danced with, okay? Like, you want to kill him once by stabbing and kill him once by slashing. And I really appreciated that movie for going against the kung fu grain and actually showing what, okay, like, even if it's one-on-one, it's like, it's that simple.
Yeah, I remember one of my good friends is a Sheldon monk, Ching Hao, who's now in Houston. But one time I was taking him on a tour through Tired Claw's warehouse, and I pulled out some of the heavy real weight swords, and he picked up this one. He was just like, "Oh, this one, so easy to kill!" And he just started slinging it around. I was like, "Huh, okay, wouldn't expect that from a monk, but I get it."
Exactly.
That is a good feeling one,
Do you have one or two super memorable guests that you featured that, like, whenever it's time to like share beer with a friend, it's like, oh, I gotta tell you about this. Do you have any of those stories?
Oh, sure. I mean, there's, I think the one that I was the most starstruck by was Yu Hai, who was the big monk in Shaolin Temple. He was a major wushu star in his day of that first generation, Jet Li generation. And he was really, I don't know why. There's something about him, because I've met a couple of the other, I've met Jackie. I've interviewed Jet, but I've never met him face to face. Yuhai was pretty. He just got me. Where it's like, oh my god, it's Yuhai. And he was such a gentleman. Ken Kuntai was another one. I mean, he was a great film star I guess the celebrities that were in movies that I watched their movies and worshiped them. Chen Kuntai is such a old Shaw Brothers catalog, and just has been in so many movies, and then he turns out to be such a gentleman and such a just exemplifies what Buddha is all about, and that was just very heartwarming and reaffirming. Daniel Wu, who I actually became a fairly good friend with, he was fun because I was chasing him for a long time because he was from the Bay Area. And he was like the wushu star or wushu competitor that became this big movie star, and in Asia, of course, he was an A-lister, and it was, so I got, getting to meet him and then hang out with him. And then we've hung out a little bit formally. He used to live up in the Bay Area still, but now he's down in Hollywood. He was a really fun person to connect with. I had the opportunity to do 2 set visits to Into the Badlands, that TV show he had for a while. And the first one was kind of fun because we're like on set, and they filmed in Ireland, so I was on Ireland, and it's freaking cold and this crazy set, and I kind of befriended some of the other reporters. This big, AMC did this huge, big marketing, and brought all those reporters who treat us really nice, and I'm sitting there, and Daniel's doing a scene kind of far off, and then scene breaks, and he like comes all the way over to me. He's like, just right off of the set, I was like, I saw a Chinese guy back here, and I didn't realize it was you. I was like, who is that Chinese guy? And then all the other reporters were like, wow, you really do know him. So that was like a nice, nice moment, he's very generous. It's always a pleasure to talk to. And I think what's fun about talking with a lot of the celebrities, particularly the celebrities that are have occurred in Hollywood, not just Asia, Hong Kong, and mainland China celebrities, is that a lot of them that started in the martial arts are just total martial arts nerds. And so when you start talking to them about martial arts, it takes it to a whole different level. You're no longer, talking to this movie star, this rock star. It's just a fellow nerd, I had that experience. Ray Park, he's just such a martial arts nerd. You can talk about martial arts, and my interview with him was supposed to be an hour, and we went like 3 hours just because we just started getting into it. Lou Reed was another one. Lou Reed's one of the hardest interviews. He's known for being like kind of a prick in interviews, right? And when we started talking Tai Chi, he would just come over and just open up, and it'd be a whole different thing. He was so genuinely into it, and I think he kind of was relieved not to kind of give the same old spiel about, what he's doing in music, what he's doing in art, but really talk about martial arts and get down and dirty with, sort of high level discussions, as opposed to like, sort of casual discussions. Usually tackle topics and name names and, talk about theory and that sort of stuff. Those guys are always a lot of fun,
I was on the set of this movie one time, and I interviewed MMA fighter Josh Barnett, and I felt that same shift. I first talked to him obviously about MMA, right? And you could tell he wasn't into it, but then because he was acting in the movie, I interviewed him about his acting. You could see him come alive. It was one of those things. I'm like some people, just whatever phase they're in, they're caring about something else, right? They prioritize something else. So this is actually something really deep that I've been thinking about recently, because there's certain people you'd be like, oh my God, you're so talented at this. Why didn't you continue this? Or why didn't you get into this? Blah, blah, blah. But then it's like, well, you don't want to be thinking for them. Just because they might have been good at something doesn't mean they ever enjoyed it or wanted to do it or found it profitable, et cetera, right? So like, I think about that all the time, because obviously we as Asians, sometimes our parents are like, you gotta do this and that. It's like, if I say something like that to my friends, how much am I just be like an Asian parent? But to them,
Asian parent. Yeah, I think also, which I'm sure you're related to, being an interviewer, you're always trying to get at that gem that nobody else gets at, and you're always trying to make that really quick connection. And sometimes, like some of the celebrity interviews, particularly for press junkets, you have 15 minutes or you have 10 minutes, and you got to just get in there, and that particular movie star, TV star, or whatever, they've got dozens of these people lined up, and they're just boom, 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 and they're answering the same questions. So you really want to try to hit them with that oblique angle. It's like sparring in a weird way, right? You want to come out of that crazy angle, hit them in the flank somewhere where they're not expecting, and that wakes them up, and then they start, really engaging, and hopefully you'll get something juicy or something more meaningful,
Let's talk about the evolution of Kung Fu Magazine. So when I saw it in stores, I think I might have been in high school, because I remember at that point I had already taken a break from my wushu journey. So, but that almost reawoke me and almost got me to train in high school. I'm glad I didn't, because I needed to move on to other martial arts. So if I kept training while I was stressed out and angry in high school, might have made me more angry. But my point is saying that is, at that point, I was, I believe, at a Shoppers in the DC area, and Kung Fu Magazine was in the Shoppers in the magazine rack. So let's talk about Kung Fu Magazine. what was its initial distribution, and then how did it evolve?
Oh, well, I mean, that's very much the transition of the history of what happened with newsstands in general. So initially, it was founded by Roger Haygood, who was part of, he still has a company, or he had this company um, called Challen Brand. And he was one of the early people that went into China and actually got, so back in the 70s, the Chinese did this crazy national survey where they basically gave a whole bunch of people video cameras and said, go document all the martial arts you can find. And they did some amazing work. A lot of it got destroyed and lost, which was very disappointing. In fact, I can't remember who it was. One of the masters I talked to, he had like literally pulled a whole bunch of stuff out of the garbage can because they were just dumping. The department had been closed, and they just dumped all the archives, and he literally reclaimed it all. And Haygood was like, he was peak feeling that he offered all these videos, some stuff that I think he recorded off of TV and stuff. And he started putting together these magazines, and he had several actually. Now back in, so this is like the 90s, the magazine industry was very different. And one of the things that was kind of unusual about it, the internet hadn't really risen up yet. And so the way magazines were reported was kind of sketch in the sense that you would put their magazines out in the newsstand, and the magazines that didn't sell, the same thing they did with paper books, they would rip off the cover and send you back those covers, and then they would destroy the paper, right? Because it was too expensive for them to send the magazines back. They would just send you back the covers. And so you don't really get receipts for like 6 months, right? And so that means that it's actually easy to set up new magazines, right? And to sell them. So say, for example, you have a magazine and you have some advertisements in that magazine. You can offer them a deal like, okay, you've got this ad in our magazine. We're starting this new magazine, and for half price, we'll get you an ad in that new magazine. And that new magazine is going to have a bazillion readers. We can distribute it everywhere, but the receipts aren't in. The receipts won't be in for 6 months. So if you design that magazine to die within a year, this is back then, you can actually just scoop in the money, get all those advertisers' money, and then it dies. And they never see the reports. Nobody sees it because per year, And so that was kind of a way the magazine industry, and this is when the magazine industry was really fat, really huge, right? It was like the primary, periodicals were the primary way that people were getting information, aside from newspapers. Then comes the internet, and that crushes it. And magazines just dwindle and dwindle and dwindle. And so when I first started with Kung Fu Magazine, that was 1999, and we were still pretty high, in the terms of, we were a newsstand magazine. We were distributed through the newsstands. It was 50K issues we were doing in orders. But then it was the death of 1,000 cuts. Every order less, and there was this sort of game you had to play with magazines, like you would try to get the magazine number front, so you pay extra to get on the kiosk, to get in certain places. There was different markets, which is very confusing. So there's the bookstore market, which was the one that we were primarily part of. There's the convenience market, which would be like 7-Elevens, or the checkout counters at supermarkets. Very different market. There's the airline market, which was actually a very, all the airplane, the Hudson News, all those all those airport stores. That's a different market. There's the college market, which is also another prime one. And a lot of the airport is super expensive. And any magazine that you see in an airport, well, I don't know if this is still true, but it used to be, they were losing money. They were just putting it out there just as advertising, right? Because the amount of money it cost to get into the airport distribution, it totally wiped out any profits you could possibly make. But you were just trying to get out there and get your face out there. Magazines was a funny business because, we were relying on ads, that was the income. It really, at best, the price of the magazine might cover your printing, or might cover your distribution, but it never really covers it. It's all really bad advertising, selling ads, But then he declines. You know, the newsstands fell back and fell back and fell back. We were initially quarterly. You know, when they first took over the magazine, this was before my time. There was two other Dojo and Dojang, which was Dojang was Korean, Dojo was Japanese, and then Kung Fu was actually then was called like Wushu Kung Fu type Qigong or something, some really complex title. And we would alternate. So 3 issues, one will come out per quarter. And then Dojo and Dojang, since this was Tiger Claw that was doing it, they had great inroads into Korean and great inroads into Chinese. Half the company was Chinese, half the company was Korean, but not so much into Japanese. So eventually that was collapsed into World of Martial Arts, which was an unfortunate title because it sounds a lot like Asian martial arts. You know, World of Asian Martial Arts is the other name. But anyway, so for a while, Kung Fu was bi-monthly with World of Martial Arts. And then finally they decided to let World of Martial Arts go and just be Kung Fu magazine. And so for the year 2000, and this is when I came on board, we were monthly. But that was the only year we were monthly. It was just too hard to sustain because we were just focused on Chinese martial arts. You know, inside Kung Fu, they opened it up. Black Belt, of course, was always wide open. You had some like Tai Chi magazine and Chi magazine, but those kind of went into more the new age markets. So they had a different corner really. And so we sustained the just for that 1 year we were monthly, and it was too much of a fight. Then we went to bi-monthly, and we were bi-monthly for several years, and then finally we kind of settled into a quarterly rhythm. And then there was the pandemic, and that killed all the newsstands. And you know, in a kind of a strange way, I'm grateful for it because you know we're just clinging on to the newsstands, being a niche mag in this sort of dying platform. And you know, making a magazine is really expensive. Got to order the paper, all the shipping, all working with the distributors. You know, it was a real struggle. Meanwhile, the internet was booming, and that was, you know, that was not as much. I don't have to buy paper. I don't have to worry about shipping. You know, if I misprinted something, I can just go back and fix it. Very plastic, you know. Once you set something in print, you're committed. So it was a lot less work in a way. And fortunately, we had started our website back in the year 2000, right? Actually, 2001 was the launch of it. And our initial idea was to put out like a magazine, but it would be all online, which turned out to be a really stupid idea. That's not the way you do it. You know, you're not going to wait for this big chunk of data to drop every month or every other month. You know, the idea is every week, got to throw something out, right? And so we went to a weekly program and sustained that for up until the pandemic. We were doing weekly publications, even through the pandemic. I mean, there was a lull when everything shut down, and that's also when we let go of the print magazine. And now, and this is exclusive just for you, sir, and that we are coming back. We are coming back in printed demand. We had a major website crash last January because this website, like I said, we built this in 99, 2000, and a lot of those plugins, all that stuff just went extinct. You know how the web works. And we knew this was going to happen, but we didn't know it was going to happen as violently and sudden as it did happen. We were planning to do this big reboot. We've been planning on it for over a year prior to it, but we just hadn't, it wasn't a high priority until it all collapsed. We have all the data, and we're rebuilding the site. In fact, I just met with the webmasters again last Friday, Friday before last, and we're going to come back. We're going to come back, keeping up with we would do a free article weekly or free content, and keeping up with the sweepstakes promotions and keeping the forum going. That's an amazing, huge chunk of data, searchable database. All that stuff, with all the stuff we had, we're going to keep up. We're going to put our issues behind those have all been digitized, and those will all be behind a subscription paywall. Phenomenal. I don't know what it's going to be yet, but right now I shouldn't pay me around because I don't really know exactly what the price will be. And then all of our videos will be behind that paywall as well, like subscription basis. But we are looking at publishing magazines again in like an e-format, but print on demand. So if you want print, and hopefully this will happen by the end of the year. That's what we're shooting for. And I'm just thrilled to be back in print. The kind of I love that medium. I love the way it's contained and framed. I'm just really excited to see how that goes. And for right now, we're looking at doing it quarterly again. So stay tuned. Should be happening pretty soon.
I think this is very exciting because I think what the pandemic also taught us, beyond the fact that all of us now have like mental trauma that we're going to deal with the rest of our lives, is that there's something to be said about physical things, right? I think a lot of people will want to embrace physical mediums and just events where you can actually go and meet people. Like I started seeing a lot of people get into chess during the pandemic, but after everything lifted, people are embracing that in-person experience. Like one of the things that helped me, because I was sort of feeling a little lost in 2023. I was also having some like head tension issues and stuff, but I started chess and then I started organizing chess clubs. So, and I'm like so surprised because like people can play chess on their phones, but why did they come play physically? Because one, you learn more playing physically. You see a 3D image, right? Your brain doesn't want to see chess on a 2D. You don't learn as quickly. But on top of that, people enjoy that physical thing, that social thing. Sure. And I think I am very hopeful that people will be like, oh, I like reading a magazine again. I get to put all my attention on that. Let's turn off all our devices. Let's just enjoy what they have curated for us because we trust that they put some thought into it.
Definitely. There was always that sort of overarching view of composing a magazine in a way that would be satisfactory to all of our readership. I always used to do at least one piece that the Grandmaster reads and get something out of it. And then another piece that I used to say was for Bubba. And Bubba is the guy who knows nothing about martial arts or kung fu and just, is just picking up because he's curious and wants to know a technique or two, and then all the stuff in between. And it just sits in a different way than online. It's just such a different experience. But we'll see how it goes.
Yeah.
I mean, I the whole print on demand thing. I work for YMAA now, which is a publisher of books and videos, and we do ebooks and we do streaming videos as well. And it's fascinating to watch that migration. Definitely DVDs are slowly declining and streaming is slowly improving. Ebooks, not so much, but I mean, there's definitely a market for it. We don't see as much impact with that. So, and personally, I like to read something physical because I've spent so much time on a computer. I think it's just burning holes in my retinas. There's something nicer about, reflected light coming off of the paper as opposed to projected light coming off of my monitor. I use blue blocker glasses. And, it's just spending way too much time in front of a monitor. So it's nice to have something you can hold in your hand. And hopefully that there's enough people that'll keep it sustained. And if not, it's print on demand. So we won't, wind up with cartons of magazines that don't sell, right? So we'll see. We'll see how it goes. I'm excited for the opportunity.
Definitely. The other thing that rang really true to me, how you described a web crash, is that recently my laptop's a 2015 design. Right? I got it in 2018, but it's a 2015 design. And I, for the first time, really started having some software issues. And then I would try to download things that might get around it. And it's like, oh, your laptop's not compatible anymore. It was the first time I was like, oh my God, I feel like a dinosaur now. It was crazy. All these things I would try to download. It's like, perfect example. Microsoft sunsetted Skype, right? Because they have Microsoft Teams. So they're like, why are we maintaining two apps that basically do the same? In fact, Teams can do more. And probably Microsoft has more control over its data, so they can like
Sure.
analyze it more. But so I wanted to install Teams on my laptop because I was like, oh yeah, if I can't use Skype, I still have some contacts on there I want to keep in touch with. And then it's like, oh, Microsoft Teams is not compatible with my Mac version. I was like,
Yeah.
so an editing software I was trying to install is not compatible. A chat software is not compatible. And I was
Yep.
like, wow. So kind of, it's like my analogous situation of you guys being like, oh, the website crashed. What are we doing? Like, our website was so old, kind of thing.
I mean, you know, we've had the web now for a quarter century plus,
Yeah.
and I think people don't realize how fragile it is.
Yeah.
You know how I mean, there's a built-in planned obsolescence.
Yeah.
You know, and that's why you see things like streaming. All the streamers are going to this subscription model. Subscriptions are better because, you know, if I'm streaming you information that you paid for, that you've bought, you know, the whole thing you've bought, I've got to keep that streaming site alive for eternity. And at a certain point, that long tail, I've lost my money, right? And I'm just paying out to keep it on the server for you who bought it years ago. But if it's a subscription model, then it flips, you know. But yeah, I'm having the same issue with so many of the projects I'm working with other companies, because I think everybody's hitting that quarter century mark and things are just falling apart, you know.
Exclusive little exclusive thing I'll tell people who watch this talk is I actually just randomly started taking an IT course because I realized like there's so much about technology I don't understand and I rely on it every day. And I will give it credit. It's actually taught me a lot of stuff. Like I was able to diagnose one thing in my laptop that I can do. First of all, being able to figure out all these things like that, I already learned. But second of all, it's like, oh, what do you do afterwards if you diagnose it? Or so like there's something I can do to hopefully give my laptop a few more years. So it's like I was like, well, that's the best thing. I mean, it's the martial artist way. It's the kung fu way. Is you keep working hard, you keep improving. Right. It's like, what can I do? Because obviously, I don't want to give up the stuff I've built. Right? You don't want to either. So it's like, try your best, try to learn, try to grow, and yeah, it was a very humbling week this week for me. And I can imagine that was when the site had a crash for you. It was like, oh my God, I have to improve immediately or else I'm going to be one of those people blaming everything except myself. And I could have learned at the time.
Yeah, it was brutal. It was brutal. And, you know, it happened at a time we had just announced our tournament and just started, you know, taking enrollment. So for a second, it was like, is this enemy action? Did somebody just had us, you know, somebody just cut our tendon out or something? But I don't know. Maybe it was, maybe it wasn't. I'm not going to postulate on that any more than I need to. It was definitely coming. You know, we had the signs. We just didn't realize how imminent it was. You know, one of those things like it was working, right? And so it was low priority, right? We're thinking, okay, yeah, eventually we gotta change our oil and rotate our tires and that sort of stuff. And someday you just gotta buy a new car, but while it's still running, you're still gonna drive it, right? You know, and of course with the periodical, we gotta constantly feed the beast. You know? So I mean, the website had 500, 600 exclusive articles on it. You know, and I'm grateful the data's still there, but it's just a matter of we got to rebuild all of that, and that's a lot of work. And some of it just isn't even worth reconnecting all the links and stuff. I mean, a lot of those links might go nowhere now, but you know, I'd love to get a lot of that archive restored. That's something we're working at, and yeah, I just want to see how that. It's a big project. It's a big project. I mean, when you feed a website for 20 plus years on a weekly basis, that's a lot of data. So much stuff. You know, our forum is so freaking huge. But you know, it's a server. It's a social database. So if you're looking at for something somewhat obscure in the Chinese martial arts, and you do a search, you'll find it, up in the first three or so pages. I mean, not Tai Chi, not Kung Fu, but something like Pihua or Bagua, maybe even. We're there, and there's a huge amount of data in terms of history, in terms of what happened. People were posting in real time, and I post a lot of news articles, and every morning I go through my news feeds, and that's interesting. I'll throw that on the forum, and I'll link it back, of course. But so there's a lot of research to be done there. It's all time coded. You've got links to the original material. You can research a whole bunch of stuff if you really wanted to, especially with the Chinese martial arts, which are so esoteric and diverse. That say you're into Xingyiba or some really unique style, you're not going to find a book on it, or maybe you will nowadays, but you're going to do these deep dives on the web, right? Search all those YouTube videos, search as much as you can. And within our forum, we've had people posting stuff in there for 25 plus years. So there's a lot of noise too. I mean, I love hitting some of those old. We used to have flame wars like you wouldn't believe in the early days of the internet, when it just wasn't. Well, I'm not sure that there's more etiquette now, but it all moved to social media. It all moved to like Facebook and stuff. We haven't had a flame war in years, which I'm grateful of. If I ever want to get back to that, I can just revisit the old flame wars, which were hilarious. I mean, everybody, martial arts, we all love a good fight.
And you hinted at this earlier when you talked about YMAA and like streaming videos, but are you guys going to invest more time in visual media, like moving visual media? So for example, maybe a YouTube channel, maybe streaming on Twitch and stuff like that? Or do you think it's still going to be mostly articles and things like that?
We've had a YouTube channel. We have a YouTube channel. We've had that for years. A lot of the content on there, we did some stuff that was sort of complementary to what was being published. So sometimes there'd be demonstration videos or something that was in our article. With the pandemic, we did close our studio, and we did let go of our video guy. I still want to tap that media. What became one of our biggest influxes was the tournaments. Because we had a guy that would come and film our tournaments, and we had a couple of series of guys. Our main guy was Greg Lynch with Badass Bunny. He would come and film, and he's an independent filmmaker. He actually did that documentary on my fencing master Tesaro. It's called Stro. He would shoot it all up, and then we just post that stuff up for free. All the championship, and then just a lot of the exotic noise, and the kids doing. We did one special on the kids doing nunchucks, and cute stuff. So that was a major influx of video dump. But if you look at our video channel, whenever we did a tournament, you would see just a ton of stuff. This last year, 2025, we actually did not have a video guide, so there's not very much stuff on it, which is unfortunate. And we'll see what happens.
I'm watching one of your videos right now. Fight for your Feiyu, as I'm watching that one. Right now.
That was super fun.
Yeah.
Yeah. Both of those ladies went on to do some other stuff in terms of stunt work, and they just applied their skills in other ways.
Yeah. This is
Oh,
look,
yeah.
there it is.
Yeah.
By the way, to any viewers watching, okay, I can't control the ads, okay, so I don't endorse this ad, okay. You know what? I guess I'm considered still a young person, so YouTube serves me these ads, but we don't endorse that ad, okay. But yeah, So, anyways, going back to this. Oh, this is cool. Very good choreography.
Yeah, but they did it themselves. We just kind of told them what we wanted to do, and kind of worked with them. That warehouse, that abandoned warehouse.
Fake you.
Yeah. That abandoned warehouse was right down the street from our warehouse. Yeah, that was a fun one.
Oh, that's a great ad, man. I hope Feiyu pay you in the future for doing that, just to thank you.
Well, a funny thing about Feius, there's a French company that bought out the international distribution, and they're doing like these kind of crazy high-end Feius. I'm sure you've seen the ads. But of course, in China, the idea of intellectual property is kind of nebulous.
Yeah.
And so what was happening was the factories that were making Feiyu, sometimes there'd be some shift and they would suddenly not be making Feiyu, but they had all the machinery. So they would put a different label on it and put it out. The same freaking shoe, And so there were so many knockoffs, Fei Long and all these other different, names. And then I guess there's a company now in America that's making a knockoff.
I think so.
Brooklyn
I've heard
or
about
something
that.
like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's crazy. And when the French company first took over, they shut down a lot of Feiyu vendors. But we were kind of ahead of the game, and we were actually working with Tire Claw actually does Tire Claw branded Feiyu. So it's got Tire Claw and Feiyu on the label, and it's from the initial Shanghai factory. So, but I mean, that the whole Chinese shoe thing, that was a crazy thing. That watching that, and then they kind of became fashionable, like Orlando Bloom wore them, and I think Emma Watson did some, and it's just like all of a sudden celebrities are doing, maybe it'll take off like the next Labubu. I mean, we had our moments, we'll see, but there's Chinese soft power right there,
Yeah.
And they're great shoes, man. I mean, a funny thing, actually, I got turned on to Feiyu at Shaolin Temple. My first trip to Shaolin Temple was with Matthew Polly, who was the author of American Shaolin and was one of the early guys that went in, and he offered like a month-long trip, right? So, oh man, a month, because most of the tours are like a couple days, right? Go see China, spend a week or so, get a day or two at Shaolin. This guy was going a month, and so I was in for a month, and that was on 1995, which was the 1500th anniversary. Actually, they had like two 1500th anniversaries because it was ambiguous whether it was the 92 or 95, and they did one in 92, but they hadn't had the international breath, and they realized how successful it was, so they did another one in 95. Chinese marketing for you. And I went to that, and it was great. It was amazing. And one of the things that Matthew's tour offered was shoes, and like halfway through, it was like, hey man, you said I was going to get some shoes, and those shoes were Feiyus, and once I put those on, my martial world changed, because they're just so perfect for Kung Fu and Wushu, and I got them imported with Wing Lam Enterprises, got them imported through Tiger Claw. When I would go to Shaolin Temple, I'd get a whole bunch of them, because they were super cheap at Shaolin, a couple kwai, and you get half a suitcase stuffed with these shoes, yeah, I mean, I even did like an article one way back, and somewhere back in the archives. Hopefully, we'll get that. My life as a Shaolin shoe salesman. I mean, you gotta understand, to make it in the martial arts, if you're not operating a school, it's rough. You gotta hustle whatever you can hustle.
Yep, 100%, man. So, what is your martial arts journey like now? I guess that's a good question to end off with.
Me personally, I still do Kung Fu.
Okay.
I still do my Shaolin Kung Fu. I still do a little Xingyi, a little Tai Chi, a little Sun Tai Chi. I still do my weapons. I still love tiger hooks, and I still love Guandao, and I'm doing Iaido now, which I've always loved. I was kind of into Iaido when I first got out of college. I was doing Kendo in college, and then I kind of transitioned to Iaido because of the opportunity. But then when I started doing the magazine, I kind of put it down because I was focusing exclusively on Chinese stuff. And recently, I came back to it because literally, Iaido Sensei just fell into my life because his dog and my dog, we went to the same dog park, and we sussed each other out almost immediately as martial artists, and just started talking. And oh yeah, I'm teaching classes like right down the street from where I live. Like, oh, that you couldn't get a better invitation, right? And then I'm doing a lot of yoga because I'm getting older, and I mean, I still do my qigong, but something about yoga that's just kind of working better for me, in terms of that longevity game. It's nice to be in an environment with yoga that's not. It doesn't have that sort of martial competitiveness, at least not where I'm studying. And in the martial arts, I mean, I think that's a good thing. I mean, I get a lot of that. It's definitely, like iron sharpeneth iron, so a man sharpens the countenance of his friend. I mean, that's biblical, and I believe in that as part of the martial way. But now that I'm older and dealing with a lot of those older person issues, yoga has been very helpful. It's a great discipline, and it's weird because I did yoga many years ago. My wife's very deep into yoga, and there got to be a point where it starts to conflict with your martial arts, because yoga is a lot about being open and unguarded and really surrendering, and martial arts is shrimp up, protect your head, protect your neck, and so there was that clash, and I still kind of feel that to some degree, but I think now that I've seen more of it, I can resolve it a little better, but also I think it's good to have a cross discipline or a different discipline to kind of balance out a lot of the a lot of martial arts masters that I've talked to have always said you have to have a supplementary art. You can't just be martial arts. You got to paint, or you got to cook, or in my case, you got to write and do yoga. You got to play music, something to balance out that sort of that whole classic yin yang thing, right? And the older I get, the more wisdom I find in that concept.
The cross discipline / find something very different to balance the yin and the yang is so important. I can't emphasize that enough, because a lot of things from martial arts are transferable. So I'm almost arguing this from like an efficiency / optimization, right? But if you have a good skill that's more like, I would say, a yang maybe, then it's like you'll have another skill that's just as transferable that can complement that skill you have from martial art. So
yeah, I mean, I think you got to be careful with that. The thing about martial arts, I mean, like, it's competitive. It's intrinsically competitive. And when you're competitive, you can often easily reach beyond your abilities just to get that win, and that's, as a young man, that's the way to do it, right? But when you get older and your ability to recover gets much longer, your ability to restore your body. I mean, now, I bruise looking great now. I'm on a blood thinner because I'm that age, and so it's I'm not going to be doing any hardcore sparring or anything like that. I can't take the shots anymore. But
yeah, exactly.
And Tai Chi is making a lot more sense to me. I mean, I've always done Tai Chi. I don't love it, but I respect it. I remember one of the last times I got to meet I had lunch with my master in Wing Lam, like about a couple months before he passed away. And we were like, I'm still doing the Northern Shaolin, I'm still doing my external Kung Fu. And he just laughed. You haven't done more internal? You haven't got all, I'm sure do all this internal stuff. Like, yeah, okay, it's kind of not, it doesn't do it for me in the same way. So, well, it will. And I'm getting there, Eventually I'll catch up to all those lessons he taught me. Right?
Do you watch any martial arts YouTubers, or do you stay off that side of YouTube?
I mean, people are always sending me stuff. And so
so whether you want or not, you're gonna watch some of that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty hooked to, what is it, McDojo, which is just guys doing chi blasts and stuff, which I just are just bad martial arts, which is just, I don't know. It's like back in the day there was Bullshido, right? Yeah. It was an old form that is fascinating. It's like, this is still going on. That's amazing. That's great.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, I watch stuff. People always are sending me stuff, and and sometimes exploring too. I mean, honestly, living in the age of YouTube, where if I forget a sequence in my form or something, I can just find that form. I don't have to remember it or look in a book or ask my classmates, who are all scattered now, of course. I can just search in the web, and eventually I'll find that form, and I'll figure it out. That reference is incredible. It's really, in a way, our generation is weirdly blessed to have access to so much information. The hard part is teasing out pulling out the gems, pulling out what's real and what's good versus stuff that's just. I mean, now we got the AI stuff being created, like, and it's so fast. Oh my god! I was talking to the webmasters, and we were looking at, let me just do this thing with let's put in Wing Chun and San Francisco, and suddenly there's this Wing Chun guy doing kind of bad Wing Chun, but it looks so real in front of the Golden Gate Bridge, and I'm like, man, that's crazy. That's so, if I was just watching it quickly, I would be totally convinced.
Yeah.
Once I stare at it a little bit, it's like, no, wait a minute, this isn't right. Something's not right here. But and when the AI thing first started happening, there was a point where I was getting an AI generated article like every week, AI submissions. And fortunately, I mean, I could imagine even running an AI article if it was any good, but most of them just came out like really bad Wikipedia submissions. And pretty quickly it's like, well, this is no human wrote this. This is a mess.
Yeah. We can see very clearly now, I think, because AI has been around for a little bit now, as in generative AI has been around publicly for a little bit. All of us can recognize AI articles, AI marketing, social media posts, AI videos. We all have the filters now. And I'm pretty sure with the uncanny valley of how close it is to humans, it's probably at a plateau right now. It's going to take a while for it to get even closer to like seeming real. That's my prediction. I think we're at the tip of the bubble now.
It's getting pretty close. I mean, like I said, if I didn't spend the time to look at it deeply, I could easily be fooled by stuff. I mean, the AI now is surprisingly robust. There was that AI, what is it, Peon, the AI K-pop star that just came out.
Oh, I don't know about that. Ooh.
She got signed for some ridiculous amount of money.
Wow, I gotta look this up. Wow.
Yeah, it's like KION.
Wow.
But it's like I watched like the teaser video. I was like, well, that's pretty convincing. That's pretty convincing.
Wow, I see what you mean. $50 million.
Yeah,
dollar contract.
Is that right? Is that true? I don't know.
Yeah.
But still,
okay.
You watch the video and it's like, if I wasn't really paying too much attention, I would totally buy that. And,
wow.
I was like a big fan of the whole Vocaloid movement that came out of Japan, where was it Kunimitsu or the basically virtual celebrities.
Yeah.
And that's such a weird permutation. I've been waiting for Terminator, and what we're getting is K-pop. Gals. It's like, okay, didn't quite see that one coming, but I could see how, again, soft power, I could see how that could take over the world pretty quickly if it's very enticing. So
let's do another talk and catch up and update, whatever you call it, around the time when the first issue comes out during the relaunch. So let's catch up.
That'd be delightful. That'd be delightful.
And in the meantime, reach out to me whenever, if you even want to put like a quick 15 seconds or 20 seconds of thoughts, or if there's a video I'm doing that you want to like jump on and give your opinion, just let me know. I'm always down to feature people.
Oh, very good. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Very good. Appreciate that.
Cool. So guys, this was Gene Ching, and we will have a lot more conversations. This is probably the longest conversation in the making, with maybe one or two exceptions. But this is a conversation that might have been more than 2 decades in the making. So
this is the making. Crazy. Wow.
Yeah.
Now you're getting me feel really old. Well,
So, guys, Gene Ching from Kung Fu Magazine and other stuff too. Both Kung Fu Magazine we talked about mostly.
yeah, very good. Thank you so
Cool.
much for the opportunity to chat.
Absolutely. Thank you for joining.